Okay, welcome to the Yeoman Podcast. I'm your host, Geoff Graham. On Yeoman, I'll speak with people who build and grow things, people who create art, and people who think about community, meaning, and purpose. Today's Wednesday, February 21st, 2024, and this afternoon I'm joined by Michael Tavani, founder and CEO of the vast and expanding Switchyards empire. Switchyards is the world's first neighborhood work club, and we're recording in the world's first Switchyards on Ted Turner Drive in downtown Atlanta. Michael, thank you for joining me on Yeoman.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, thrilled to be with you. I'm going to ask you to share in your words what Switchyards is, but I'd like to tee you up with a story, or it's not quite a story, it's more like an experience or a feeling or an observation. And I think many Atlantans will relate to it, and people from other places all over, they'll have their own versions of it from their own towns. But in the springtime or in the fall, when the weather is perfect, I'm in Piedmont Park a lot. Go out there. We live real close to the park, and you go out there, and I'll regularly have this experience where I'm up by 10th Street, sort of looking north over the park, that green rolling hill, and you look down to Lake Claramede, and there's all these people there, these families, and picnicking, or people throwing the frisbee, or people exercising together, people just strolling about. And you have this real sense, like this beautiful day, all these people out. This is our city at its very best. You really have that feeling like when we are at our best, this is what it looks like. It's kind of this aspirational view of the city. And I know people have the same kind of thing in their own towns, communities, cities, wherever they are.
Yeah.
But that's where I feel it. And I realized, I've been a member of Switchyards for a long time, years now. And I realized a couple weeks ago, while working there one afternoon, looking around at the vibe, I was like, this is the same vibe. Like all these great people, all sorts of different people in there working on things that are exciting to them. And it reminded me of that vibe in Piedmont Park. And so to tee you up, my question for you, I'd love for you to share what Switchyards is in your words as the founder. And I'd also love for you to reflect on maybe why I'm getting that feeling when I'm here.
I appreciate that intro. That's great. I mean, you read the words, the world's first neighborhood work club. Neighborhood work club are three words that are pretty common, but we smushed them together. I actually remember exactly when we smushed those words together during like a walk that I had with our creative director around Inman Park. We were trying to search for the words to describe Switchyards. And I've been doing Switchyards for a long time now, and I still don't have great, because Switchyards is one of these things that it's very nuanced. And it's not, I think anyone who would come into a Switchyards on a busy day, I could walk them around in 2 minutes and they would get it. Mm-hmm. But when you're trying to describe it to someone that doesn't get it, everyone has their own thoughts of like where someone's coming in. And so I try to relate it to the person. If I'm talking to a neighbor and they've never been to one before, but they go to coffee shops, I'll try to describe it a certain way. So anyway, neighborhood work club is how we describe it. And that doesn't mean anything to anyone because we just made that up, even though it's like you can kind of imagine what a neighborhood work club is, but it's kind of a made up thing that's why we're the world's first. The way that I would describe it is we are going through a transformational period of time in how we work. This was happening already due to the advent of, computers that can fit in our backpacks and in our pockets, mm-hmm. and Wi-Fi and, Zoom and all these types of things. This was already happening in the world. When our dads went to the office, or even 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when you got a job, your company said, here's the desk and here's the office and here's the HQ. And like, we want you to come here 40 hours a week. And because I was doing the first Switchyards, this one, in 2016 we opened, I was just seeing every single day what's actually going on here. It was kind of an experiment in a lot of different things. But one of the things was it was this physical place. And so it was an experiment in what's going on, in how people are working and what people want, what they don't want. And so we're going through this like really big reshuffling right now, where you have big companies that don't know how to handle remote work, hybrid work. You have employees that are like, I kind of like the flexibility, but I'm also kind of missing the interaction. So you have a lot of things going on. And, I like to think that it's probably the biggest reshuffling of work since the introduction of the 40-hour work week. That might be dramatic, but that was like 100 years ago in terms of how we work. And the biggest way that I would describe Switchyards, if you think about the notion of going to one place and opening up your computer and working, this is knowledge work. I'm not talking about doctors or teachers or, people working in making products. I'm talking about knowledge work. People basically sit in front of laptops, which is a big segment of the population, obviously. The idea of going to one place and working in one place for 40 hours a week is a pretty outdated notion. And if we and that evolved from the Industrial Revolution and where, and going to a place to work. But knowing what we know now, and if you and I were like dropped onto this planet cold, and we were having to come up with like the workplace, it wouldn't look like an office, because if we didn't know any of the notions of it. So anyway, long-winded answer of
all these people, hopping in their cars, driving 3 hours to an office where everybody sits in their office at their own private office desk, looking at their own screen.
So work is a variety of activities. It's deep focus, it's checking email, it's meetings, it's whiteboarding, it's creative sessions, it's strategy sessions, it's all kinds of different things. So it's a variety of activities. And historically, all of those activities have happened in one building, one place, the office. And my belief, and I had this belief pre-COVID, but my belief, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew something was going on. My belief was that there's going to be some different places that emerge that don't even exist yet. And so our, belief, I guess, in like 2018 or 19 was to put these kind of membership coffee shops. That's not how we would describe it, but that's how I would connect with someone to describe it. Put these these membership coffee shops into neighborhoods that take some elements of office space, some elements of co-working spaces, some elements of great hotel lobbies in other cities in the world. Atlanta doesn't have too many of those. And great elements of libraries, coffee shops. So inspired by a lot of things that exist in the world already, and kind of smash them together into this thing that we call Neighborhood Work Club. And the feel of it is this place that's in your neighborhood that's open all the time, where you could grab a cup of coffee, the music's good, the atmosphere's good, the design's good, and you can just crank out a couple of hours of whatever it is you're cranking out. And the two use cases tactically of Switchyards are pretty simple. Use case number one is I'm just lonely. I've been working at home for a while. I don't see anyone. I miss the Tuesday and Thursday when I used to go to the office. Now I don't. And I don't necessarily want to talk to others. I just want to be around others. And I think that's baked into our DNA, that kind of human connection. So that's use case number one. And Switchyards is a pretty good vibe for that, because some locations will have 30, 40, 50, 70 people, in there. So you're going to be around some people. And then the second use case is the flip, actually. It's the inverse of that, which is I can't focus at the other places that I am. Whether it's my dog barking or my kids, wanting me to hang out, or my spouse asking me to do chores, or my roommate is here, or whatever it is. the person in the backyard's blowing the leaves. I just can't. The internet sucks at my house. I can't focus, and I just need to go somewhere to knock out like 2 hours of work. And if I could just go somewhere to knock out 2 hours of work and really focus, then carry me through for the day. So those are the two use cases.
I mean, that latter one, I have a home office, and I find that when I come to Switchyards, where I need to be doing focused work, there's something about the vibe that I can totally focus. I mean, maybe that so many people are like, so many people around here radiating that.
Yeah.
On the first point, on the loneliness side, I been thinking about speaking with you about this. I thought about 2 books that were written at the same time. One was Bowling Alone in 2000, Robert Putnam, about sort of community atomization and people not being kind of connected to their neighbors and community members in a way that they had been previously. A decline in the number of clubs, bowling leagues, that's just a thing, elk clubs, whatever, all those sorts of things. And it was a kind of a dark, the trend was not looking good for Americans with regard to how atomized communities were coming. And then I also think about a book that was published a year prior. Ray Oldenburg wrote this book, The Great Good Place.
That book single-handedly had some of the most inspiration for this.
I can, and with that, we never talked about that before, but I can totally see that. He coined the term the third place, and it was, historically that would be a cafe or the pub that was, the corner pub that was there, or, or a library might have been that place, or wherever. It was a place that you could go, that you were not obligated to go, but the people in your community would go, and it was this other place. In your home, it wasn't work, but it was this other place where you could be, and you weren't obligated to interact with anybody. No one was obligated to, interact with you, but you were sort of around your community, and it became this bind for communities. And so you started downtown, and as the first place, and now you're doing, neighborhood work clubs. How many are there in Atlanta? You're in double digits.
10 in
Atlanta. 10 in Atlanta, and
13, 3 more in Charlotte.
And about to open in Charlotte. And neighborhood by neighborhood. And then there's one in Midtown. I haven't been to Midtown yet. West Side is a little closer to me. I get Virginia Highland all the time. And I go in, and I don't really know anybody here. Actually, I know a lot of people, but professionally, in the tech world, creative world, you tend to know people. But I recognize a lot of faces, and a lot of faces recognize me. We don't even talk to each other, occasionally, exchange pleasantries, but that's about it. And it's just, it feels good. And something about it, being a part of that community, feels really good. And so when I think about Bowling Alone, it's this really kind of dark story about this path of our communities. I think about Switchyards as being this great example of a new third place that Oldenburg talked about. And no, Oldenburg work.
I mean, that book. So I actually have not read Bowling Alone. I have.
I've heard
it, and there's a movie that just came out, a documentary called Join or Die, I think. That's about Bowling Alone, I think. So
how if you're part of things, you live longer.
So I need to read that book and watch that documentary. They're both on my list. But Great Good Place was recommended to me by a Switchyards member in 2017, probably. And it was while I was operating.
This is before you really began.
So the quick history of Switchyards was I had some affinity for place. I couldn't describe it in buildings and a lot of things that you and I connect over that we'll talk a little bit about here, place and physical. And so I don't know anything at the time. This is in 2014. Don't know anything about commercial real estate. I wasn't in commercial real estate, but I just had this idea to go buy a building.
And you bought the building that year, right?
Bought the building in 2014, went under contract. 2015 we closed. 2016 we opened this building, which was 1928. Just kind of a working man's building in downtown.
And I'll link to some of the stuff here, but just so you know, the building that Michael, it was a bold move
Yeah.
to buy this building. And,
No parking. Atlanta's a car city.
Yeah.
We don't have one parking spot. Downtown Atlanta is not the center of activity in Atlanta.
you had no real estate experience.
No real estate experience. So it was a bold move, but it's funny. What I had in spades was I was going to be the operator. Mm-hmm. So I was like the owner operator. And so when you're doing it for yourself, I actually felt good about filling up the building with members, whatever the business model was going to be. But renovating it and that stuff was a challenge for me. The getting a loan and all that stuff was a challenge for me. But filling it up was the easy part, which is probably the opposite for a normal commercial real estate person. Mm-hmm. Oh, I could fundraise, but now are we going to be able to fill it up? So I actually had what I realized is when you have the demand side, that's all that matters. Mm-hmm. I had a family friend.
Revenue cures all problems.
Yeah, I had a family friend that came into Switchyards like a year or two after we opened, and he's in commercial real estate. And I give the tour, and it happened to be one of those days where it was just packed, this one. And he's like, you realize you might be making more per square foot than Ponce City Market or so. I think that was the example that he said, because you have so many people in here, And when he said that to me, I'm like, maybe I'm pretty good at like this commercial real estate thing. So anyway, the first one was this kind of startup hub. We were focusing on consumer startups, on design-focused startups.
That's right.
So it's kind of this like Atlanta tech.
Which just meant should have been your background.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the earliest thing, was to just get a bunch of people into a physical place, and didn't really know the business model and never planned on doing more of them, because that was enough of that felt like enough. It was just like a one-of-one project. But I'll figure out the business model. And it's funny, someone told me this the other day, that this is what founders do on their second startup, is they start places because they don't know. And I don't know if I was thinking it that way, but it was definitely a business where it's like, I could at least do this and I'll figure out what the business is. And that's kind of true. Like, I don't know if I was thinking that, but so it was this 19,000 square foot, 90-year-old building that we were renovating, and we were going to fill it up with all of these kind of people working on startups and design and all that. And then we'd figure out the business. But we did some things really well. And then we had some challenges of just like, macro challenges of like a building in downtown Atlanta. But I think generally we willed this thing into existence, like, doing programs and events and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah. You inviting great speakers all the time. You've had Killer Mike. You had the
Sid
Mashburn, Charles Brewer. Really great people coming and talking.
I think the brand and the soul, because I was like here every day. People would ask me, "You working on anything else?" I'm like, "No, I'm here. I'm here too much. Like, I'm here every single day. Like, no, this is all I can do." So I think and Dave was involved with Switchyards at the time, and so
this is Dave Payne, your co-founder at Scout.
Yep. And so I think we outpunted our coverage in terms of the care and the time that we spent on doing something interesting. And so I think someone once told me, this was a compliment a couple years in, and it really hit me. It's like, it's extraordinary what you've done to get all those people to downtown Atlanta. Because there's challenges to get people here. I mean, again, there's not a lot of parking. It's not in the middle of the best neighborhood in Atlanta. It's not the most convenient location. It's hard to get to. And that's friction that I think a normal business would maybe not be able to overcome. But we had done, I think, such a good job of caring and trying to create something that we didn't quite know what we were creating, that caused enough people to be like, I think we had a strong point of view. And that strong point of view attracted people. And so some good stuff happened. But one of the things that we did, and I'm being long-winded already on this podcast, stop me here, Geoff. But one of the things that we did was, we got to put a coffee shop into this place. I love coffee shops. I've never been a barista. I'm not like a coffee snob, but I like hanging out at coffee shops. And we had spent a lot of time on Scout Mob, working at Octane, and the vibe was amazing. You start to know people there, and it was my third place. I used to go there so often, and I was always bumping into people. And the MailChimp founders were there when they were starting, and Georgia Tech students were there, and moms with strollers were there.
Octane was, is the way I describe it, because
it was known for. Yep.
They sell to Revelator.
They sold to Revelator, and then they ended up getting kind of
but Octane was the third place for lots of people, but third place particularly for the Atlanta technology software community.
Yep.
It really was.
Yep. And it was kind of, it wasn't the first kind of great coffee shop in Atlanta, but it was, it felt like they were the one that they were an early coffee shop in that part of the city on the west side, which was, just changing from industrial to other uses. So when we were opening Switchyards, we definitely have to, this building's not that big. It's 19,000 square feet, but it's like, we definitely have to do a coffee shop. That was a non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. We got to do a coffee shop. And so we actually decided to do something that was pretty innovative, pretty creative, which was instead of just leasing a corner footprint to the coffee shop, it probably wouldn't have been a great revenue driver for Octane. I got to know the owner, Tony Riffle, pretty well. Mm-hmm. And he was a believer in this project, but he also runs his own business. And so maybe you guys end up just signing a small lease, or we got to do something. We ended up saying, hey, you help us get this thing off the ground in terms of what equipment we need, who we need to hire, but we'll operate it, because we wanted to integrate the coffee into the membership of Switchyards. So the experience that we came up with was, this building is not open to the public. It's a club. And the front door has an access control on the door. And so even the coffee shop has an access control to even get into that. But when you're a member of Switchyards, you can unlock this door and anything you want, cappuccino, latte, whatever it is that you're drinking that costs. I just went to Nashville last weekend and paid $7 for something, a cappuccino. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So whatever you're drinking was free. It was part of your membership. Mm-hmm. And we went one step further, and we had this kind of mug wall where everyone had a coffee mug with their name.
Yeah, what happened to my mug? Where is it?
It's somewhere. Yeah, it's somewhere. We'll get it for you. So that was a pretty, and so, I think you'll see this trend of us doing this, but I think we wrote, we're trying to rustle up some interest in Switchyards. We wrote a blog post that this was the first, membership coffee shop in the country or something. Mm-hmm. We did some research and we couldn't find any others. I'm sure there was, but we couldn't find any. And so that was pretty innovative. Like that was an interesting part of the experience, mm-hmm. that like there was this full blown coffee shop, and it was part of the membership. And so now you're starting to see, I think, some of my thinking now in 2017, 2018, and we also operated offices here. We had small offices that you could rent out.
There were a lot of different offerings.
A lot of different offerings.
Different packages, yeah.
But one of the memberships was only $50 a month. So we had this $50 a month membership where you didn't get an office. You basically just got kind of coffee shop access. You could hang out there. Mm-hmm. And so some combination of that, what I was seeing with my own eyes in membership at Switchyards, where is everyone on Friday? Like, I think we've created something pretty cool here. How come no one's showing up on Fridays? Because that was my first introduction to, even as cool as Switchyards was, we're giving out free coffees in a cool building with a good vibe. People just wanted to mix it up. They don't want to sit here 40 hours a week. They want more variety than that. On Friday, maybe they're working from home, or they're meeting a friend for lunch, or they're, running, doing exercise during lunch. So they end up doing a work from home day. This is in, 2017 or 18, a lot before I think most people were thinking about this pre-COVID. And then someone recommended Great Good Place. And that book was, you should see my copy. I have it downstairs. I mean, I think I read it 2 or 3 times, and I was really like obsessing over every word, because it was preaching to the choir. And so really the thinking was in 2018 or 2019 was, could we take not this whole building, but could we take just the main floor of Switchyards, which was that kind of membership coffee shop, and could we put that in residential neighborhoods, which downtown is not, in true residential neighborhoods throughout like a city? And that's kind of how that idea came to.
So the first was West Side, right?
Inman Park.
Inman Park was first. Okay.
So September of 2019, we opened 2 locations within 2 weeks of each other, mm-hmm. on complete month-to-month deals. Mm-hmm. Like
Yeah, and then you shared this with me back.
Month
This
to
was
month.
sort of like the thing that like the Halloween stores would,
Yes. So month-to-month deals, Inman Park, and then 2 weeks later, this is September of 19. Everyone knows what happened in March of 20, but September of 19, we opened Inman Park, and then 2 weeks later, West Side. Yep, on month-to-month deals.
So I don't want to forget to come back to the process of opening new locations, how you decide what they are, and how that's changed over time. But as you were talking about, I do want to talk about Made with Soul in Atlanta. Made with Soul.
Yep.
And as you were describing what y'all were doing in the early days, and I could see it when I would come by, like, there's so much soul in this place. Your soul per square foot is really high. It's very, very high. And you're now, I think you said 13
Yep.
with a handful that are sort of scheduled that are
20 by the end of this year.
Yeah. How, maybe we'll talk about both these things. How do you scale soul? Because it's really hard.
Yep.
Like, and also, who do you think has done it?
It's a great question. Well, first off, I don't think enough brands, even at a small scale, even have soul.
Yeah, totally.
And so I thought you were going to ask, why do you have soul? How do you have soul? But
I don't know. I kind of take for granted it. Maybe that's a good thing. But I take for granted that you clearly are putting yourself into this place and the people that you have.
Yeah. So I think you didn't ask the question, but I guess I proposed it. I'll answer the question that I asked is, I think step one is one of the things that I'm probably most proud of with Switchyards is that we've actually created a product, a brand, a company that I actually would flat out be a user of. Mm-hmm. And so it's something that I actually like. And I think I can only, not I think, I know I can only create products, brands, companies. If I'm going to spend my life doing something, it's got to be something that I could be the end user of. Yeah. So I'm kind of building a product for myself and others like me. Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing that, the soul actually feels pretty natural because it's like, oh, I would like that, or that'd be interesting. I'm not thinking, well, what does the end user want? Let me go ask them, and then I'll try to go match that thing for them. It's really a gut decision on almost everything that we do to say, like, what's going to make this place special? Like, what's going to cause me to want to come here more often, or what's going to cause me to want to join this location or use this part of it? So that's kind of how I've known to even put any type of soul into a product. And our original, we have like a neon sign on the side of the building, which is actually out of order right now. They said it was going to last 40 years, and it's only been like 8 years. But our original neon sign that's highly photographed, tons of people do wedding shoots, Super Bowl.
I mean, you've really done something special when you've created a place or something where people want to have their engagement photos from the video. Or special event photos. Yeah. You have done this?
Wow. Yeah.
And Austin Tennell, who we interviewed prior, Mason, one of the places they built, it's like the place to go for your engagement photos.
And the funny thing is we weren't thinking about that. We were just trying to create something actually with soul that we thought would be cool, that, and we faced it outside, and then it ended up being a great thing to take photos of. But, so Made with Soul in Atlanta was kind of our original thing. As we're expanding outside of Atlanta, we've softened our use of that. We still use it. It's on places, but it was our original kind of tagline. The question is how do you then scale that? And one thing I'd say is, like, we'll see. We're about to go try to do that. What brands have done that well? We try to look outside of our category. In fact, I'm not inspired by anyone in our space. I'm uninspired by people in our space. So we very intentionally try to look in completely different spaces. Like, let's look at an Italian soccer team. Let's look at a hotel brand. Let's look at a library. These are like, a public library, or let's look at, just very different businesses than us. We get inspired by some brands that went out of business, like, Riches, the legendary department store in Atlanta. I read a book on Riches. For 100 years, they were kind of the crown jewel of businesses in Atlanta. and they had just created this brand that people had this like strong. So we try to get inspired by lots of different things.
I was thinking about, and as I said that, like, who can do that now? I can immediately think of brands that did that. Like, I think Sid Ashburn has done that.
Yep.
Like, I know you're a fan of Sid's.
Yep.
And I think going back earlier, I think Mindspring and Charles Brewer totally did that on a huge scale.
Yep.
Scaling the business with soul.
Yep. Our head of design, who designs our locations, one of the things that him and I talk about all the time is we're trying to do something that I think some would say, I don't believe this to be true, but some would say that this is impossible. How do you scale soul, or how do you scale a great brand? How do you make, and so what we talk about all the time is how do we make our most recent club the best one yet? So as good as the most recent one is, let's make the next one better. I heard this guy who runs this thing called Zingerman's Deli. It's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Yeah. He's kind of a legend in the world of kind of small giants brands with a soul, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I heard him on a podcast once, and he said, the question is how, they only have one location. They have a pretty thriving business. They're in a few different things, but it's just one business in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They never expanded. And he said, the 16th, his exact quote was, the 16th location of a thing is never as good as the first. And we're at 13 right now. And so I think we're opening actually on Friday, 2 days from now, we're opening in Germantown in Nashville. And I just saw that location, and I think it's truly right up there. It's maybe tied for the best. It's really good. And so what I talked to our head of design about is hey, a lot of people don't think we can do this. And we've kind of, I think, taken it on a challenge to ourselves is let's go try to do this. I think right now we're just getting started. We're actually starting to get better at the operations and the design of things that we can swat away, that were challenges for us in the early days that we can now swat away. Mm-hmm. So that we can spend more time, more calories, more bandwidth on the stuff that's really moving the needle. And so I actually feel like right now we're just getting started. Now, there is a certain speed, and this goes back to some of the how do you fund this business, but I think there is a certain speed where it's just almost impossible to keep the soul. If you're moving at a certain speed too fast, I don't think you can do it. But this year we'll open 10 locations. And we think that is actually very manageable. We're building up a team to really dial that in. Can you do 50 locations in a year and keep this all? I don't know about that. Yeah, we've never done that, but I think that might be tough. But at the clip that we're at, feels like we're moving fast. But we have it pretty under control, and we're getting better. And it's kind of a fun challenge. Not a lot of people have done it. There's people that have done it, but not a ton.
You've shared this with me before and maybe talk about how you're choosing locations, and then also the constraints you put on yourselves for the TI, creating the space. I think you've shared, and I don't know if this may have changed, but you have real serious budget constraints on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And a point of view about what the space is going to be like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're doing that I can't think of a brand. There are brands that I'm sure have done it, but I can't think of many that have done it at scale or nationally. Is we're looking at a stock of real estate that is weird.
Yeah,
it is not I think about the example that we use sometimes internally is a Sweet Green. Sweet Green's a public company right now, and I can only imagine their real estate strategy is hey, what are the nodes of high density foot traffic in a city like Atlanta? And when they're going to come launch Atlanta, they look at a Pot City Market, or they look at an Avalon or a West Side or a Buckhead something. So they're looking at probably sub 10 areas in the entire city of Atlanta. And they're pretty obvious what they're looking at. That's why you see all these, Allbirds is next to Warby Parker, is next to Sweet Green, Away Luggage, whatever. All these types of brands are in a few neighborhoods in the city because it's where high density of foot traffic is. We're looking at great residential neighborhoods, not necessarily great retail neighborhoods. West side of Atlanta is we have a location there, but it's a little bit of a trap because you actually don't have a ton of people that live on the west side. You're starting to get a lot more apartments and stuff, but majority of people live on the east side of Atlanta. West side's where a lot of these brands are. And so when we go into new cities, we always think to ourselves, is this a trap neighborhood where it's kind of a little bit of a tourist destination?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily. So one is identifying like the great neighborhoods where people live.
So when I go, it's Virginia Highland or West Side generally.
Yep.
I live right between.
And they're both hard to find. If you even have to know where you're going.
You have to know where they are. Virginia Highland, first time I went over there, it's like, well, I'm at the address. And you got to walk down a little alley, and y'all added a little tiny sign there now. So if you know kind of thing. But you walk down a little alley, and then you turn, and then you open a white, and there's a Switchyard sign on it, but you open a white sort of picket fencing kind of door, and then you go up a stair to the second floor of a little tiny, just perfect space.
Yeah.
You really got to know where it is.
Yeah. So like, what can you think of a brand that's found those? That's the best example probably of one of our spaces that has found those at scale. Mm-hmm. And those are a lot of times owned by mom and pop owners.
Total. Actually,
we're
renting one of those spaces next to there for similar business.
Yeah.
Could never.
I remember you telling me that. So these are not institutionally owned.
Yeah.
So yeah, but what we say is it starts. Virginia Highland is a great example in that it starts with the space, meaning like just the notion of us, before we did anything to it, just the notion of us signing that lease at that location is a point of view that is not checked out, that is not, that one has more of a point of view than some earlier locations that we might have done. So we have to get everything right to open up a location that's perfect. We have to select the right neighborhood. We have to select the right location within the neighborhood. Of course, the economics have to work out, and then we have to fill it with the stuff and the membership. And if all those things work, then you have like a bustling location that's a great, business for us and a great experience for everybody. But all those kinds of things have to happen in unison. So I do think we're looking at a stock of real estate that's pretty unique at scale. And we've been able to do it in a small way, and now we're trying to ramp up a little bit.
Do you, and it's worth sharing that you have a wait list for membership. Is that right? Like and the last three, I think you said locations, four locations you've opened have sold out immediately.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. So we've been building up to this point for a while, but the last four locations.
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. Yeah, that's right. Well, I was talking to someone the other day, like, as we were talking about, before this, is like these things take time.
If you had this idea today, started it, you would not be doing this.
It's funny? You'll appreciate this. There are times, where's a piece of wood around here, but there are times where I'm like, man, things are really working right now. And I almost feel a little bit bad about it. Like things are coming too easy. They're actually working. They never actually work. They're twice as hard, twice as expensive, take twice as long. But they're actually working. And sometimes I feel bad about it. And then someone will remind me, it's been 10 years. And then I think, okay, I guess I was really, running up against a brick wall. Hustling and pushing it and trying to push this boulder uphill on something. I didn't even know what that something was for many years before we got to this point. But yes, the timing, I think, as well, we've dialed in the product market fit of this product and really nailed it. And now it seems to be working. So we're trying to keep it going.
On the way over here, my nephew, give a shout out to my nephew. He's a chef in Charleston, Graham Calabria. So y'all look up Graham Calabria, and he does private events, and he's outstanding chef, awesome. But we're real close, and he was texting me, he's like, God, the year so far has been great. He's very young, and things are just going so great, and I think it's my new brochure. I'm like, no, it's not true. It's that you've been around. Like you were still here and you're still working at it.
Yep.
And I mean, it could be the new brochure, but like, but you've
Yeah.
been around, and I could, this maybe is fifth year or so, sort of with maybe fourth year, having hung that shingle. And there's a lot to be said for just being around, the experience you accumulate, and then everybody kind of the brands you build, people see over time.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's, you know, again, you and I were talking about this, but I do think that time is the best thing. Not a lot of people have it. Not a lot,
right.
in business. Everyone, I think a lot of people are trying to rush things. Of course, like I think the faster you do things, the better, you know. But I think time shakes a lot of things loose that only time can shake loose. Mm-hmm. In terms of learnings, you know, the first, so from 2014 of like having this idea to buy a 100-year-old building to 2019. So for basically 5 years, which is when the V2, we say we're on V2 of Switchyards.
Yeah, I was asking.
So kind of V1, it was the first one, you know, and V2 is, you know, everything since the Neighborhood Work Club. And, you know, we've iterated a little bit there, but we're on V2. And hopefully we only ever have to be on V2. But 5 years on the first one. And it was, I look back, I was looking back at my email on something recently, and I just got nostalgic, and I'm reading some old emails of like early Switchyard stuff. And I'm like, I wasted so much time going down paths that were fruitless and doing this. And I think everyone, you know, they say you'd never jump into anything if you knew, you'd never do Big Ridge if you knew how hard it's going to be. But I think if the first 5 years of Switchyards hadn't have happened and I learned the lessons and I wasn't in a rush, I don't think we would have gotten to this one. Like, I don't think this was an idea that you could have in a laboratory where you're just like, yep, you know, I really focused and I got to this idea. I just think it took, you know, I try to tell the story as quick as I can, but it's just so many, a little learning from here, a little learning from here, a little learning from here, you know, so many little learnings from different places over years. And then you smash that together and each one of those makes the business. It wasn't one thing.
Yeah.
Isn't that how these things work? And it's the only way I know for them to work.
Well, I think also you have, I wonder if there are exceptions, but occasionally things come right out of the gate at a super high velocity and things go great. But I think more often, you know, that velocity before someone really knows in which direction they need to go, it's going to kill it.
Yeah,
it's going to end up killing them, or kill the business or the idea or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I got a hard question for you. These have all been softballs, but thinking about how important community is, us like as people relating to each other, even we evolved to do this. We also, our co-evolved species are dogs. And from the get-go, you've been like hardcore no dogs. What's that?
No dogs. By the way, I don't see one here. You know our little mascot.
I know. I see.
Isabel wearing Adidas high tops,
which actually makes it my dog is particularly offended by that.
Yes, we have a few fun lines from his name's Petey from Petey that says, you know, I'm the only dog allowed in this place. So actually, the no dogs thing is a good example of a lot of how we're thinking about this point of view of this business on a lot of different fronts. Soul, you know, I think you could call it point of view. Soul, we call it sometimes a little bit of punk rock. Sometimes we'll call it sauce. It's kind of like, you know, it's this strong point of view on things.
Yeah.
And I'll start with music and then I'll get to dogs. No one asked for Switchyards. No one asked for this product. I can't even describe what it is. And so we're putting something out into the world that we don't even think people know they need yet, but they actually do need it. And I think that's what we're learning. That's what we've seen in a lot of the demand recently. And And so no one is saying, this is exactly what it has to be. We're kind of feeling around in a dark room to create the experience, from a real estate side to a design side to meeting rooms, no meeting rooms, phone booths, hours, what's the coffee? Every decision is like, it feels like we're doing it for the first time and having to figure out what's the right, and I'm sure you've had to do all of that with Big Ridge, right? It's just like, no one can tell you, well, this is what we did here. And like, you're trying to get inspired by some things, but it's all new. And so on music, we have leaned into this kind of strong point of view on the type of music, but also the volume of music. And probably the top complaint that we hear, there's always complaints that we don't hear. Those are the worst ones because you don't hear them, so you don't know how to react to them. But the top one that we hear is the music's too loud.
Yeah.
And we have the music down to a decibel level. And we know. And so I used to be self-conscious of like, maybe it is too loud. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we're not good enough yet to know if it's too loud or, but now we have it down so tight that we're like, nope, like we're not, I hate to tell you, but we're not changing the music volume. It is what it is. We have it dialed in. There are quieter places that you can go at Switchyards. Maybe you can move away from a speaker or whatever. And the reason why we made this decision and the dog decision is,
I'm kind of joking.
I know you are, but I think it just speaks to
I'm also kind of serious.
Yeah, but the music's one actually isn't a joke because a lot of people ask that. I think it speaks to
people tours and they're like, I don't know if it's kind of loud.
I think it speaks to. All right, you're joking. I'm not going to answer it. I think it speaks to us trying to put something. We used to allow dogs. But then we just realized that, like, if you're not a dog lover, then it actually ruins the experience for that person. And, and so, you have, like, we don't allow food. So the dog one's a joke. We don't get much of that, or maybe it was a joke for you, but we don't also allow food in Switchyards, like meals. We don't allow full. You can't bring your last night's barbecue to Switchyards. Right. And it's one of our big rules that we're going to lean into more and more and more and more. So these are just points of view that we have on, we actually think, it goes to a lot of the third place stuff, is sometimes what's best for an individual isn't actually best for the collective thing. So if we actually lower the music in Switchyards, it might be better for you, but then it's worse for everybody else because now everyone else can hear a call or a conversation or whatever. So we've had to make a lot of non-consensus decisions, dogs included, music included, food included, that we think are contributing to making this a better experience, because this is a lot of people. This is like a social experiment. It really is. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of people in close proximity working together, and there's, some people, they just don't have the self-awareness. They talk too loud or they're taking a Zoom call in the middle of, like in the middle of a table with, and there's a lot of that going on.
There is a lot, but there's not, it happens. But as a regular, there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it's impressive how much emergent congeniality there is among everyone. And that's actually part of when I talked about the vibe I get here being similar to sort of what I observed at Piedmont Park on a beautiful day. There is this kind of emergent congeniality, and certainly some people are kind of, oblivious or whatever. But for the most part, everyone is very sort of mindful and aware. So and so that when they're not, you totally notice it.
Yeah. And I don't. We should take some credit for it, not all the credit for it, but I think a lot of that is due to. I really believe in strong points of view attract people that believe in that strong point of view, and music is just a symbol for us of like. If you like your music loud, a little bit loud, just slightly, then like you might like this. You probably used to like working out at coffee shops or whatever. So,
it also serves there's a function behind it.
Yep.
And that it is like a more powerful sound machine that dampens everything around.
That's right.
And it's not music that I'm generally I can't work to music.
Yeah.
It's not that tool.
Yeah. Yep.
Like technically, so where does music come from? Is somebody working on that playlist?
Yeah. Yes. It's such an art, like all.
It clearly is, because into placemaking and creating a space, and I'm like, how is someone making this decision? Is this something someone subscribes to?
I went to a restaurant the other day. I can't even remember which one it was, and I was surprised that the music didn't match the feel of the restaurant. It was like in a restaurant, and it was kind of loud just in general. And so the music you could barely hear, but I'm like, this is not the music that I would have expected this place to be playing. Mm-hmm. And it's like so yeah, I mean, for us, this has been like years in the making, years. First off, we used to have playlists or speakers that were always, they would end at the end of an hour, and then there'd be silence. And there is nothing worse than a third place with no music. And like, music is one of the strongest. I'm not the guy who does the music. There are better people than me at it, but I do know enough to know that like we have to have music playing. It's a big, big part of this experience. Yeah. I remember going into what was the earliest co-working spaces that was maybe in your building or whatever. Remember that building?
I mean, we did Ignition Alley.
Ignition Alley.
Yeah,
I remember going into day one of Ignition Alley on the other side of the street.
Yeah, when Tim Dorr.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. This is 2009, and they were still getting some stuff ready, but there was no music on it. I remember being like, they really need to be putting music on here. It just when you're in like an old echoey kind of concrete building and there's no sound, it's just like you can't even have a conversation. So it's just taken us years to get this music thing right. And we have a few people at Switchyards that have a good ear. And the main thing that I'd say on the music is to try to put some stuff out that you've never heard of before. It's a little like maybe I should know about this, because this is because Switchyards is thoughtful about everything else. Maybe like we have an employee at Switchyards he's our longest employee. He's been here for 5 or 6 years now, and he just has really good music taste. Mm-hmm. And he could play anything. And because of the trust that you now have in him and that I have in him in music, mm-hmm. I'm like, maybe I should know about this. This is good stuff because he's playing. I think that's what we try to have from a brand perspective is like, if you went into Sid Mashburn and you're in there, that they're just not playing some Spotify station.
I mean, I subscribe to the Sid Mashburn play. You do it every year. You can
subscribe. Same.
Totally curated.
Yep. And so, I think brands, if we're going to care about every other little detail, that's not even a little detail. That's a big detail.
Do y'all still have, and it was just so much traffic that I removed it from my Slack list, but y'all still doing Slack?
No.
I remember
got rid of it.
I remember talking to you when you were contemplating getting rid of it, and I was like, I get it because it was too much. But there was a time when every member was invited to the Switchyards Slack, and there was a lot of chatter on the Slack. So why'd you get rid of it?
So the main reason why we got rid of it, because there was definitely some positives, mm-hmm. but we felt like the negatives outweighed the positives. And the main negative was it basically was a social media platform for our members that we were hosting. And we felt like people piled on. Mm-hmm. People wouldn't even have strong thoughts on things. But then, and by the way, this is probably, I'm no expert in like social media, but this is what happens. Like, I don't have points of view on this, but then I read 2 or 3 people talking about it, and now I have a point of view on it. And I didn't even know I should care about it. That's what Switchyards Slack was becoming. And so we felt like it was kind of the worst of a social media platform, except this was one that we hosted.
Yeah, right.
And so we're like, wait, why are we hosting a social media platform where people can just badmouth us and pile on topics? And the final straw for us was just some topic that was pretty, I don't even remember. It was a small thing, it wasn't a big deal, but everyone was piling on some decision we made or whatever. And everyone was piling on, and we're like, all right, that's it. That's the end of it. Like, we're just going to kill it. and there was a backlash, and there was an underground one that started of members that were mad, but it was absolutely like the right decision.
Oh yeah,
so that's what it's great for. It's great for a company. We use it this way, but again, that was a social experiment, and we just didn't like the results of it.
I could see there was some cool things about it. I could see all these the new member announcements. Like
that was that was the best part.
And you would sort of get this view about like there's this community here.
Yeah,
that was great. And then there were useful sort of updates that you might share from time to time about things that happened in various buildings. But it did get to get to the point where it's very much becoming, and you could unsubscribe or you can view stuff, but it seemed like it was interruption and noise and chaos at a place that you wanted to be.
Probably like anything, there was like a small group of people that were very vocal, and then everyone else had to listen to that. So there were some good things there. I think we'll try to not bring back Slack, but we haven't found quite the replacement yet that's kind of better than that for us. But what's interesting is we've really actually stripped out.
It was for that you talking to me about that. I was like, I will Slack for the Bridge members.
I mean, exactly. I think there's just some things. Could you imagine if a restaurant had like
every patron that came in?
It's just like there's just I think there's some things where you need a strong point of view, and again, even though there were some positives to it, so we killed it. We haven't regretted it for a second.
How long ago was that?
Probably 2 years ago.
It's been a long time since I thought about it. So this has been Switchyards was not the start of your career, not remotely. And we're a ways into, we're about almost an hour into this. So I'm not going to ask you to share the pre-Switchyards part, which is also fantastic stories. But you've got ahead of you have Charlotte, and I gather y'all will expand further in Nashville and in Charlotte and
Atlanta.
And you're going to do more in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So look, before that, I was like, I read an interview with you like 5 years ago, and you were like, someday we might even have 10 Switchyards in Atlanta.
That's funny. Jeez, I should stop saying putting numbers on it. That's funny. Yeah.
What TP? Well, you go outside the
Yep. So right now, the 10 in Atlanta are all, ITP. Chambly's the closest. Your old roots. Chambly's the closest.
Ours too, aren't you?
Yep. Yep. So I grew up in Dunwoody.
Yeah.
And I live in Brookhaven, so pretty close. And so, and Chambly is doing amazingly well. So it's kind of the furthest. Have you been to that one?
I've actually been a decent amount. If it is on my way, for like if I'm meeting a friend up there for lunch or doing something up there, it's an easy stop for me. It's a great. We just got the backspace of it, which was an hour, so we're going to grow it. But there was a point in time, I remember this clearly, where 2021, we're reopening coming out of COVID, and we were looking at the map of Trader Joe's locations in Atlanta, and we're like, maybe we'll do, we had 2 locations at the time. We're thinking maybe we'll do how many locations they have in Atlanta. And I think they had 7. I think that was the number I remember. So maybe we'll do 7. So maybe it was right around the time probably of that article. But now we're at 10, and that's just ITP. And we think we can do, I don't know, at least double that in Atlanta. There's still a lot more, and we're feeling around. I mean, the reason why I could totally see one at Roswell.
Yep. The reason what we're figuring out is, we have locations in town that are, think about Old Fourth Ward, Virginia Highland, Cabbagetown, Downtown, Midtown, West Side, Virginia Highland. We have like 4 or 5 locations within like a very small, and I know in town everything's a little closer, but we have locations. Midtown's like less than a mile distance-wise from here, very close to here. So we are feeling around in this dark room for what what is this thing? Like, can we do 20? Can we do 50? Can we do 30? 12? Like, what's the number in a city? And, Atlanta is 6-7 million people, metro. Like, what's Nashville's a lot smaller. Charlotte's kind of in between the two. So we're kind of figuring it out. So simultaneously, we're trying to launch new cities to learn what that process is like. Because now you got to get furniture and stuff to another city, which we had never done before, even because we're based here. So how do you go do that? How do you fill up locations from a marketing perspective? How do you find great neighborhoods in a city that's not your backyard? So those were a big test for us last year in Nashville. But at the same time, we're like, how dense can this be? And so Atlanta is kind of the density experiment. And then the other cities, we're learning the other part of this. And so at some point in time, we'll take those two learnings and see where we can go with it.
We've chatted about this a little bit, but I'm interested to get your refreshed or your most up-to-date thinking. You've done Atlanta, or investing heavily in Nashville, Charlotte. But as I recall, for kind of overhead or whatever reasons, that you felt like it's hard to do a smaller market like a Greenville or Charleston, or at least you're not ready to do that yet.
Yep, we love, like, we talk about Greenville and Chattanooga all the time. Like those cities a lot, but we're just not quite there yet because there's an operational, the biggest thing is there's an operational complexity to building out a city in stages. When you're at one location, 3 locations, 10 locations, those are like different operations, needs. And the nice thing is like in Nashville, where we are about to have 3 once they open, you can start to then, like, we know we're going to do more than just 3. So you can start to kind of build for that. Whereas in a city that caps out at 3, which Greenville or Chattanooga probably cap out at 3 locations, which is totally fine. It's just, you don't get I think you get some fruits of your labor on locations 3 to 10, because you've done a lot of like in Nashville, the things are working really well there in Nashville, and now we can get some benefits on these next few locations that we open. We don't get that in the smaller city, but we're also thinking pretty contrarian about our growth strategy, a la, Waffle House or DoorDash. DoorDash was, I don't fully know their story, so I hope I'm getting this right, but I think DoorDash was known for launching in the suburbs, which was a counterintuitive move because everyone else that was in that industry or that space was doing the cities. Yeah. And they were all beating each other up, and then they were in the suburbs, and they kind of were the last one standing, and then they were like, all right, now we're going to come to the city once you all killed each other. So we kind of like cities, or the Southeast in that way. So I think we're going to stay in the Southeast for a while. We are that a lesson from Scout Mob, one of many lessons, but one lesson for sure from Scout Mob is New York was our second city. San Francisco was our third city. No, that we'll never do.
I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but Dave Payne and Michael started Scout Mob, a daily deals site, and was that 2012? 2010. So, essentially with Groupon was exploding, except for y'all had a daily deal site that people loved and was profitable and it worked well. Also in Atlanta, you grew it kind of building off of prior work. Yeah. And then the struggle was sort of carrying it to other markets.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that space, there are a few similarities. It's funny. I'm like, how did I happen to choose these 2 spaces? But there are a few similarities, not a ton, but a few, with Groupon, which was the elephant, the gorilla. What's the expression?
I guess the elephant in the room would be something that you don't want to talk about.
Okay, the gorilla.
The gorilla is I don't know. I guess so. Yeah,
one of those. Yeah. The gorilla was, so anyway, between Groupon and WeWork. Mm-hmm. There's a few similar. So Scout Mob started in 2010. Groupon started a couple of years before that, but we were in the same space. We were doing something pretty differentiated.
Yeah.
But we were in the same space. Just like Switchyards doing something very differentiated from WeWork, but in the same space.
Yeah.
And if, and at one point in time, a lot of people like forget this because, we live in what have you done for me lately world. But at one point in time, Groupon was on Business Week magazine, the cover as the fastest growing company of all time, something like that. They were on fire. They were turned down a $6 billion offer from Google to be acquired. They ended up going public. And so they were this high-flying startup that we were in the category of, and we felt like we were doing something, like, we were kind of eating their lunch head-to-head in cities that we were in when we were doing our thing and doing something much more interesting than what they were doing, but they were this kind of, monster in space. So, a lot of lessons there. I think Dave and I talk a lot about this, and I think you could probably relate to some of this stuff. We were happy. What I would describe, for me personally, I would describe Scout Mob as happy to be in the major leagues. Mm-hmm. You could imagine an athlete who's just like, got there, whether it was after trying for many years or getting there after, we had done a few things, Dave and I, before Scout Mob, and he's a little older than me, so he had done even more than that. But we had done a few things together, and they just didn't hit, and then Scout Mob really hit. And, we raised a little bit of venture money, and we kind of, started launching other cities. But I was just happy to be in the major leagues. Mm-hmm. And looking back, the 10,000 hours thing or whatever, like what I know now compared to what I know then, I just know so much more. Mm-hmm. I'm so much more confident in the things that I'm good at and the things that I'm not good at. And I think I've been so much more thoughtful this go around of we got something really, and maybe that's why it's taken 10 years, because I wanted to be thoughtful about it. But it's not that was unhealthy. It wasn't. We weren't we didn't raise a ton of money or anything like that. But I think there were some mistakes that we made looking back on it that I think if we were a little more experienced, a little more thoughtful, a little more like slow down and had seen it before, that I think we would correct here. And, to go full circle, Dave's on the board at Switchyards. Mm-hmm. And so, him and I talk, we spend most of our time talking about Switchyards. Yeah. And I think we're taking a lot of our learnings from a decade plus of in between of just, and applying them to this business and trying to, I'm treating this one very precious because I know we have something good and I don't want to mess it up,
Yeah.
So,
well, it's clear you do. You really do. Your team have poured your soul into this place. It shows. Switchyards members are passionate about their membership. And part of a big part of why I wanted to have you on Yeoman is you have created this thing that is kind of helping to bind neighborhoods together in a way that is really, that I don't know of other businesses that are doing it this, what's the term? This thoughtfully at the pace y'all are doing. It's great.
I really love in this, I don't know anything about AI, other than reading an article every once in a while. I'm just not in that world. And I really love the way it worked out. It just worked out this way that I am working on this very IRL, real world, totally tangible, physical, this in a world of wherever AI goes, maybe that's the buzzword of the day, or maybe will define the next, decade or, century of stuff. But I love this. I don't know, Dave calls me the biggest contrarian that he knows. And I actually I'm like, no one calls me a contrarian. I don't think my family or my wife or, thinks I'm a contrarian. Maybe I am, but I think it's like a little bit of just, I think we all as entrepreneurs, you probably wouldn't do this stuff if you're, it's just a little bit of doing it my way or doing it a different way, or everyone's doing it that way. They think that's right. I think this is right. Maybe there's a little bit of that, that we all have, but I love everyone swimming this way. And it's like, we are creating a business that could have been created to this concept of third places. Ray Oldenburg talks about third places throughout history in that book. Mm-hmm. Albert Einstein used to meet his friends at cafes to talk about their scientific theories. The New York Stock Exchange was started at a coffee shop. Civilizations throughout, mankind have met at third places, mm-hmm. different types of third places, but we're doing the same thing, and so I think it's pretty fun that we're creating a business that could have been created, like we could have done this 100 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I love it too. And I think you're right. This precious thing that we have, I think people are assigning more and more value to it now. And it's great work you're doing. That's probably a good place for us to wrap up.
Thanks.
So I want to have you, so before I close, this is like what podcasters are supposed to do. The obvious places to find Switchyards are all the Switchyards handles everywhere.
Yep.
Right.
That's right. Yep.
And you yourself, you're not particularly active on any of it.
No, things. It's funny. I think as Switchyards has gotten more momentum, I've just decided to focus. And that doesn't have anything to do with social. I love social and I love Twitter and Instagram and all of these types of things, and they're great news sources for me. So I actually have nothing against them. But I think it's just as this thing has been working better and better, I've kind of just wanted to focus more and more. And there's just a lot more noise. There's a lot more things to do. And there's just more inputs. And so I've just tried to eliminate as many inputs as I can and try to stay focused. And, I read some quote recently. I forget the exact expression, but it's like anything that you experience in the world that's truly tremendous has taken, there's just been an obsessive amount of time. Think about how much time we've spent on Big Ridge. The obsessive amount of time on drives, on runs, on walks, in the shower, 24/7. Oh, what if we did that? What if we did that? I've been doing that for 10 years on this business. And so, I'm just trying to stay really focused on creating the best thing that we can create now that we have some momentum. Because there's some compounding effects to it. And so I've been guilty in the past. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like this. I've been guilty in the past of chasing shiny things. Shiny things are fun. I think human beings like shiny things. There's a reason why we chase them. But in the last couple of years, I've probably been more focused personally than ever on the few things in my life, Switchyards being, a primary one. Of I'm going to do these few things really well. And so that's why. But Switchyards is very active on social, at Switchyards or whatever.
Well, it shows. The focus shows. Thank you, my friend.
Yes.
Coming on.
Thanks for having me.